much for the intro. As was said in the intro, my name is Tanaka Mutakwa. I work as the VP of Engineering at a startup called Names and Faces. We basically build a simple visual employee directory for companies so that employees at their own companies can know who's who at their own organization and figure out where everyone fits in. It's a SaaS application, so companies buy the product from us, and then we set up a directory of all their employees for them. Today, I'm going to be talking about making the leap into tech leadership, which is a topic all about people who are moving from an individual contributor role in software engineering and stepping up into a technology leadership role. And a technology leadership role can really vary across companies into what it actually is. Here I'm showing a couple of titles that someone could have when they're acting in the capacity of a technology leadership role. So most common is usually CTO, so you're really at the top of the organization. But people such as engineering managers, director, VP of engineering, even sometimes senior engineers or senior developers are doing a lot of leading of their teams when they're working in these roles. It's really a role where you now have the responsibility of the team that you work with and their delivery. And depending on your role, sometimes that also comes with people aspects to it. So people reporting into you and you doing their career growth management and also administrative management, such as approving leave and motivating to get salary increases and things like that. So yeah, this is sort of the typical route in which engineers end up in a tech leadership role. You grow very well in your individual contributor software engineer career. You're really good at what you do from a technical coding side, and senior management at your company notices that a lot of people come to you and ask questions around how to do things and get help from a technical perspective. And management decides that perhaps this person should lead this team. So they call you up one day and they say, well, you're promoted. You're now the tech lead of this team or the engineering manager of this team because we've noticed that you're really, really good at coding. And hopefully that change in the title or anything comes with an increase in responsibility and your salary. And most people accept the role and not quite sure what they're getting into. But a lot of people who do go through this route quickly realize that there is quite a significant difference between the skills that got you really good at your engineering and the skills that are needed in sort of managerial or tech leadership role. Now, there are some things that cross over, but there is a lot more things that come across when you're now in the tech leadership role that deals with like managing people, conflicts between people, motivating people, caring about people's career growth. Those are less individualized skills, but more about you thinking about a whole team versus about yourself as an individual and growing. So a lot of leaders who get promoted because they're really good at technical skills and they get into tech leadership role usually end up getting frustrated that they're not really good at this tech leadership thing and they really prefer what they were really good at before. And in some companies, you would be fortunate enough to have been prepared beforehand. Like as you're growing in your individual contributor career, you get prepared for these tech leadership roles so that by the time you get the position, you're ready for it. Or sometimes as soon as you then get promoted into that role or selected to be a tech leader, they put you through training to help you sort of grow in the managerial side of things. But a lot of people don't get that. So as I say, they get frustrated in the role. And the people who they're leading also get frustrated because those people quickly notice that their tech leader doesn't really have the leadership skills, even though they have the technical skills. So in this talk, I'm just going to share quite a number of common mistakes that new technology leaders make when they start acting up in that role as a way to sort of prepare people who are stepping up into those roles for things to watch out for and things to address when they get into those tech leadership roles. So the first common mistake is coding full time. This is the most obvious one because you do get really good at coding while you're an individual contributor. It is the reason you were noticed. It's the reason you ended up getting promoted. So it's your default place where you find satisfaction because you know you're really good at coding. So you end up defaulting to going back to that and not concentrating on anything else that a tech leadership responsibility requires. So this is one of the first common mistakes. And I think it's important as soon as you become a tech leader to realize that you're not measured on your output alone anymore. You're actually measured on your full team's output. So even if you are doing well on the coding, but the rest of your team is not delivering, you're actually failing as a tech leader. So that's something to be aware of and to be very careful about, just falling into the trap of coding full time. Another mistake is because now you're a tech leader thinking you are the one who has to make all the technical decisions. Yes, you were promoted because you were really strong and you're really good at the technical side of things, but it doesn't mean because you are the tech leader, now you are the master of all and no one else in the team can make technical decisions and everything has to go through you. For multiple reasons. One is you quickly become a bottleneck if all the technical decisions have to go through you because the whole team has to wait for your availability all the time before they can make decisions. The second problem is if you are making all the technical decisions, then how are you empowering your team to grow if other people don't get to sort of learn from what the decisions they make, the mistakes they make, and the positive decisions that they make for the company? So to empower your people, you need to be able to release a bit of that. You need to be able to guide, of course, and still remain technically strong, but you're not responsible for making all the technical decisions. And then another common mistake is forgetting about cultivating team culture and not taking care of your people, leaving problems to someone else. As an individual contributor, often things get sorted out by someone else, either whoever is your team lead or your manager, or sometimes it's even your talent team or your HR department that sorts out a lot of people issues and cultural issues in your team. But as a leader, you are responsible for setting the tone. You're responsible for building a positive team culture and helping your team grow and helping your team gel well together and collaborate well together. You're also responsible for taking care of your people, making sure their careers are growing, supporting them, making sure they're happy at the company. And where there are problems, you are supposed to be the one who steps in there and make sure you unblock people and help resolve any conflicts that occur. It's once you are in that position, you can't just sit and leave it to someone else because in the past you used to see problems get sorted without you stepping in. Then there's also talking only tech. As an individual contributor software engineer, you're often in a team with other software engineers and your discussions often center around technology and you can go very deep in your discussions around tech and you don't need to sort of bring your discussions a level higher for people that are not technical. But once you get into a tech leadership position, you are sort of the face of your team to the rest of the organization. And sometimes you will end up speaking to people who are not technical or who are not tech savvy, who work from other departments, but need information around what you're building or when things will be delivered. And you're supposed to be able to communicate technical things in a simple, understandable way. So you shouldn't default to only speaking to tech people and only speaking the technical language. You want to learn how to communicate with the rest of the company and also being able to communicate with clarity and bringing technical concepts to a level in which everyone can understand them. Time management also is very critical. It's also a common mistake in that people who've just become tech leaders say yes to everything. They're constantly reacting. Their queue of work is always full. And I think it's important when it comes to time management to be able to figure out what are the most important things that you really have to work on yourself and prioritize. What things can you delegate to other team members so that they can help you spread the load? And then on the final note, and very important one, is what things can you say no to right now that you can always pick up later, because not everything needs to be addressed right now. A lot of noise does come through to you as a tech lead. You can wake up and there's lots of bugs that people want fixed. There's requests on like, what's going on with the features that are getting built, why are they delayed. Someone might come in the morning and tell you they've got an offer at another company, and now you need to sit down and convince them to stay at your company for different reasons. And that's a lot that can happen, and you might get lost with all that constant pressure. And if you don't manage your time correctly, then you won't be able to. It's not sustainable. You either burn out or you will really be frustrated in the role. And then another common mistake is assuming you need to have all the answers. So it's not embarrassing. It may appear like it's embarrassing if you are the leader of a team and someone asks you a question, but you actually do not know the answer. But this is the point in which you actually need to be vulnerable enough to show your team that you can be honest and open to say, I actually don't know the answer on that. Does anyone else know? Or should we investigate and try and understand how to solve that? Assuming that because you're now the tech leader, you need to have all the answers is also another recipe for either not being as honest with your team or always appearing stressed out because you need to know everything and trying to understand everything, again, possibly leading you to burning out because you're trying to have a handle on everything that is going on. So it is okay. In fact, if anything, if a tech leader, you want to be able to build a team in which everyone around you eventually at some point can get better than what you were or what you are right now. That is a sign of a good leader. So if you ever have to leave, you will know you've left that team in a very good space. So you don't need to know all the answers, and you need to be able to be open and vulnerable enough with your team. Tech leadership can also be very lonely. You can easily isolate yourself. If it's a small company, you might be the only tech leader. And because you're now in a different role and you don't spend all your time with the rest of the individual contributing software engineers, you can easily end up isolating yourself, and you don't have someone else to communicate with about how to solve sort of the leadership problems you're facing. So that's something to be careful of. If you are in a bigger company where there are multiple tech leads or multiple engineering managers, try form a team together and always help each other when you're dealing with different issues on your team and chat together. If you are in a smaller company, you can always chat with other tech leaders from other companies and meet people at different meetups or something, and you can always meet up outside or jump on calls or have coffee and just chat about the problems you're experiencing, so that at least you've got some support. I would also suggest getting a leadership mentor. And the leadership mentor does not necessarily have to be someone who comes from a technical background. It can be because leadership is something you find across the world, despite it being, it's not only a technology thing. So you can get a mentor who's even in another space, but understands leadership and understands people well, and they can guide you and help you with some of the issues that you'll be dealing with. The key thing to remember here is just not to isolate yourself and feel like everything you're doing, you have to figure out by yourself. Another common thing is mistake again is thinking people are the same. So as engineers, we all know about the single responsible principle. So we do like to write something once, and that can be used many times. And a mistake you can make when you get into a tech leadership role is assuming that all the people are the same, and the solution or a suggestion that worked with some in the past will always work with another person. But individuals are very different. They've got different motivations. They've got different goals with their careers. They've got different things that can frustrate them. And it's important to understand each of the people that you work with as a tech leader, to understand what motivates them, what frustrates them, and you'll be able to create solutions as depending on the individual. So it's important to have consistent check-ins with people, understand their backgrounds, understand where they're trying to take their career, and you'll be able to motivate correctly depending on each individual. And then not seeking feedback from your team about your leadership is also a common mistake. And it can also end up frustrating you a lot as a leader, because leadership feedback takes a long time to come back. As a software engineer, if you wake up in the morning and you pick up a ticket and you write some code and you release that code, you get immediate feedback because you know the work you did that day, and perhaps you got it to production on that same day and people are already using it. So your feedback loop is very quick. Whereas a tech leader, it can take months or sometimes even longer before you see the impact of the changes you're making. Sometimes the changes you're making are around how does our team work, what are the processes, or helping someone grow their career, helping a junior engineer develop their skills. That can take time. And sometimes you're not even sure if everything you're suggesting is the reason behind that person growing. So one of the best ways to actually see how well you're doing is to ask your team constantly for feedback around your leadership. Like, could I be doing something better? How am I doing? How am I supporting you? Am I supporting you well? Is there something I could have done better? And that's the best way for you to not end up feeling the pain of no feedback and not be quite sure how well you are doing as a leader. So having heard all those sort of challenges that a tech leader can face by taking up this role, a number of you may be wondering why anyone would ever want to step into this complicated space as opposed to just continuing in their journey as a software engineer. I understand it is complicated, but at the same time, it is very fulfilling when it works really well. If you imagine scenarios where perhaps a team was not really performing well and you stepped in as a tech leader and managed to get the team collaborating, working well together, and delivering high quality solutions frequently, that can be really fulfilling to know that you were able to achieve that. It's also very fulfilling when you're able to grow someone's career and you see them thriving in their future roles and you know you had an impact in their career. So as much as it can be challenging, I think with the right learnings and with the right knowledge and doing it very well, you can have a massive impact in software engineers' careers. And if anyone's listening who is not yet a tech leader and has thoughts in their heads of being one in the future, this is actually the perfect time for you to start practicing and learning about tech leadership. As I mentioned earlier in the talk, usually people only start doing that once they get into the role and they're already starting to get frustrated. But it's better if you're well prepared before you even get into that role. So there's quite a lot of things you can already start doing now before you are officially given the title to start practicing and preparing yourself to be a good tech leader in the future. Suggestions could be mentoring some engineers at your company, setting up a whole internship program at your company so you get a whole perspective on how to recruit, how to market the company once the interns are in, how to onboard them, and then how to offboard them when they leave. There's so many things in that space. There's also a lot of resources and things you could start learning from, and just getting a mentor who's already a tech leader and learning about what their day-to-day looks like. So there's a lot you can do in preparation for getting into these roles. And for existing tech leaders, there's always a lot of more material out there that you can use to learn and keep growing in this tech leadership journey. I've added a couple of examples just so people know where else you can look for these sort of tech leadership learnings and what resources you can sort of use. So there's newsletters and podcasts. There's quite a number of technology leadership newsletters and podcasts out there now. The newsletters are usually released either once a week or once a month and usually have curated content on good tech leadership material that's been found. And you just need to subscribe to get access to them. There's also quite a number of podcasts that also invite guests who are in the tech leadership spaces, and they discuss different approaches they use to motivate and manage people in their tech space and their journeys into tech leadership. So a lot to learn in that space. So you can always do a search. If there are some here that I've listed, but can always do a wide search for technology leadership podcasts or newsletters. There's always books, one of the best ways to learn. So just reading books that talk about technology leadership. These are some of my favorite books, the ones I've read, that also teach you again about like different examples of how people have set up a culture at their companies, how people got into a tech leadership role from their software engineering background, and what sort of practices you can have in place to motivate your team and everything. So books are also a very good knowledge space. And then finally, I would encourage people to also look out for in their communities for meetups and conferences that are geared towards technology leadership. There's always a lot to learn and good people to meet who've got the same interests in those technology leadership communities. We've got a tech leadership meetup in Cape Town, which we used to do in person until the pandemic, but now we actually do online, so anyone can join from anywhere. It's on the first Tuesday of each month, and you can find out details around it if you go to Leadership X on Twitter. The Lead Developer Conference, there's the Lead Dev. They have a website, and they've got lots of in-person and videos and blog posts on for supporting tech leadership. That's one of the best communities out there. There are a couple of communities that have Slack communities where people can just chat, and there's lots of channels around technology leadership that you can step into. And then I just thought I would note that with technology leadership, if it's something you're not interested in and you are one of those software engineers who's more interested in the technical route and going deep with technology, don't feel the pressure to jump into a technology leadership role or management role specifically just because of the money. In the past years, maybe there was a bit of a skew that people who get into those roles got paid more, but now a lot of good companies have created parallel tracks for those who want to go into sort of a management role and those who want to step into a deeper technology role. So it's always best for people who are interested in technology leadership and interested in people and know that's what they prefer and they would really like to be good at that, to step in the roles. The motivation should not be about trying to earn more money to get into those roles. And just to close off, I'm sure some of you have heard these sort of sayings. So people actually don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers and leaders. So it's important for us, if you are in a tech leadership role or you're interested in getting into one in the future, how you show up can really set the tone for how your company does. And then another one is there's a high chance no one will remember the feature you built in 20 years, but people do remember their managers, especially those who mentored them at the start of their career. So again, bringing back that idea that tech leadership can be fulfilling and you can have a massive impact on people's careers. And that's it from my side. Again, I said earlier, my name is Tanaka. I work as a VP of Engineering at Names and Faces. If you want to chat, I'm on Twitter at General Mutakwa. Always keen to connect with different people in the tech community. And I also occasionally write on my blog here at mutakwa.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much for excellent talk. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So also thanks in the chat. Do we have any questions? So I guess maybe I can start off. Are there kind of differences in doing tech leadership, I guess, in Africa, South Africa, as compared to, say, other parts of the world? Any advice you have in that area?
I think it's mostly similar. I mean, leadership is quite universal. That's why I even said, even outside of technology, you can get mentored by someone who's leading a team at a company and they're not doing technology, because I think the principles of helping people grow their skills, motivating people, understanding and building trust with your people all remain the same. I think what may differ as you go across the world and going to different places might be cultural approaches to things, which obviously you have to be aware of and conscious of. If in certain places there's a way to sort of speak or a way you motivate that maybe is different in a different country, That's maybe the things that one would want to be aware of and learn. But generally, from the material I have learned from and looked at, a lot of it has actually not been from South African leaders, but it applies to the teams here in the same way that some content that's created by people who are in the leadership space here in Africa can be used by someone who's outside. So I think mostly there's quite a big overlap, except I think the one thing to keep an eye on is any cultural differences and nuances that you want to learn about.
Thank you. Any other questions? Also, feel free to just unmute yourself because we're not so many, and you can ask in person. So in terms of your writing, is this something that you think people should do? Is it a good way to communicate with the broader world? Has it enabled you to grow as well?
Yeah, I think there's many benefits of writing, and it depends what you're trying to achieve. At the very basic, I think just writing to be able to create clarity of thoughts in your head is important and be a massive benefit. So you might not publish it with the goal of looking for hundreds and thousands of readers on your material. But then when you write something and you put it out in the world, you usually have to have a sort of a set of thoughts that you are committing to. And sometimes you might need to research a bit more to understand something fully before you write it down, which is where the learning comes in. Or sometimes just in outputting it out of your head, you're writing it in a way in which someone who doesn't understand the concept can learn from you. So you have to distill the topic into such a simple way that it makes it even clearer in your head, the way you understand it. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits of just writing, is just that bringing that clarity of thoughts, especially if there's like lots of different ideas that are in your head and you're not quite certain which direction to go. Then of course there's for education purposes, where you've got some deep knowledge in a particular area and you want to help the rest of the community or the rest of the world understand that topic. And that's also very beneficial. Like, I mean, now we know the internet is like widely spread now, and it's a quick way in which I can be in South Africa and write something, and people across the world can read that material as soon as I published it. So it has obviously opened up that ability for you to share any deep knowledge you have and help other people out there who are also on the same journey perhaps you were on a few years back, get up to speed. So I think those are the main benefits. It also helps you build your profile as an engineer. When people are recruiting, they will perhaps look at what else do you do, what's your profile like online, and if you do show the interest in sharing the stuff you do, it can help them understand you a bit more. But it also shows that you are open to helping the rest of the developer community. So yeah, so lots of benefits to writing. I would always encourage people to try it out, just even if it's just a case of they're not really trying to share it too far out publicly.
Thank you. So we have another 5 minutes or so, and then have a session where can meet people in different meetups. So if there's questions, feel free to ask. I'm curious, you said that you, of course, have to maybe cut back on a little bit of keeping up with technological developments. How do you balance that? I mean, even as a dev, you can't really know everything. So that's always a limitation. But I guess one still maybe has to have feel for what might be good or bad technical decisions. And those maybe make you're not doing as much active development or any active development.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think as a start, the answer I'll give to that is it's when you're growing in your software engineering career, it's good to have a good understanding of just the software development fundamental principles, because a lot of things sit on top of those. So maybe back in the day, API calls used to be made using SOAP, and then REST came and everyone's like, REST is better. Then GraphQL is now, people are talking about GraphQL as another option. But at the end of the day, what you need to understand fundamentally is what's the purpose of these API calls, and what are the things that define a good API. And regardless of which version you're using or which type you're using, something like good documentation is still important. So as you step away from the idea, where I'm going with this is, as you step away from the sort of day-to-day coding, but now you're also still involved in helping the direction of the team and everything, there are people who are now going to be in your team who are going to be the sort of on-the-ground coding experts. But when you chat with them and you try understand whether they're making the right calls and everything, you've got the right sort of questions you can ask. So how are we doing documentation? How easy is it? You want us to move to this new technology? How easy is it for us to do documentation with it? How do we handle errors, and how do the errors get surfaced and things like that? So that's the fundamental principles will really help you in the long run. And then it'll also help you quickly evaluate decisions and technologies that your team is making, despite you not being like actually writing the full lines of code that are getting used. And then the other one is obviously using your team to gain as much context as possible. That's why you want to constantly check in with your team. They'll help you. They'll be explaining to you why do they want to do things or how they're approaching things. And you'll be looking at it from the lens of, are there any risks in the way things are getting done? And you actually can learn a lot from that. So you don't only, of course, if you had to then go and write that code yourself, it might take you longer because you need to fully understand and learn the syntax or how things are getting done. But at a higher level, you are able to explain how your team is doing things and what choices they made. And you're able to influence a certain direction if you see something is a bit off. So what you just need to sort of let go of a bit is, if you had to do it yourself, how long would it take you? It's probably not going to take you as quick as someone who's coding every day. And I think that's the sort of trade-off of leadership, is as you step up in the leadership ladder and your responsibilities become more about driving strategy and direction, you let go of being able to execute on the ground and like do things on the ground yourself. But you've got more leverage, because if you imagine someone who leads 100 developer team, the amount of work that 100% developer team is doing is the impact they are making, versus if they stayed and continued doing the work of one developer because they wanted to continue writing code even though they had leadership potential, then the impact they have is up to the amount of code they can do and they can make within their one team out of those 100 engineers. So it's also a perspective thing, like what really drives and motivates you. It can also be that maybe you want to stay and continue coding. That's why I think I spoke about, let's not have tech leaders who are motivated by just the idea that they'll earn more money if they go into the role. You really have to be excited about people and supporting them and growing them and being in a leadership space. Yeah.